Hey guys, and welcome back to another video tutorial on automate processes and building a basic website. In this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to build a basic navigation button menu. So we can have a couple of buttons down the bottom of our screen here, for example, and the user can click on each of these buttons and take them to a different page of our website. So where we left off last time was we got our website to load in different pages by creating a custom function called load page. And that could load in our home, gallery, or contact page whenever we wanted to. So what we need to do now is create buttons so we can use that function to load in the page from a user point of view. So what I'm going to do is go back to Flash Develop with my project already open. If you don't have your project open, just go to Project and Open Project and get back to here by opening the ActionScript 3 project file. So what we're going to do first is create buttons on our stage. So I'm going to head back to Flash and using the text tool, let's pick a black color for this. I'm just going to click anywhere and type out some text. So I'll just call this nav text. Just make sure we're using classic text and it's set to dynamic text. These are two very important properties. And let's give it an instance name of nav text. Okay, so I'm just going to position this text down the bottom here, and I'm going to press F8 and turn this into a movie clip. And let's call the movie clip name navlink. And we'll keep its registration point in the center and press OK. So what we want down the bottom of our screen is we want 3 buttons, but we don't want to go in and manually change the button names, because what if we want to add more later down the track? We want to make it kind of dynamic and easy to use, and also something that's going to take less time to redevelop if we ever have to go back to it. So with this navigation link down here, I'm going to hold down Alt and click and drag to create a clone, and then click and drag once again to create another clone. And these are going to act as our 3 buttons. So our first button here, I'm going to call it Home Button. And yes, it is a movie clip, but we can use movie clips as buttons, and they're much more effective, and I'll show you why in a second. So our second link here, we're going to call it Gallery Button. And our third link is going to be Contact Button. So now that we've got our stage pretty much set up with the buttons that we want, let's head over to Flash Develop and get coding. So with anything that we add to our stage that we want to refer to in our code, we have to do this specific step, and that is just above our constructor function, we're going to create a public variable for each of the movie clips that we have on our stage. So I'm going to say public variable, and I'm going to give it the name that we called it on our stage, which is Home Button for our first button. I'm going to data type that to a movie clip. And likewise, we're going to create another public variable for our Gallery Button. That's going to be a movie clip. And one more time for our Contact Button. Okay, so now that we've got our buttons linked up in our code, we need to add them to a list which will allow us to easily loop through them and actually get information that we want from a specific kind of list. So what I mean by list is, just in our index function, I'm going to create a new variable, and this type of variable is going to be an array. So I'm going to start off the variable name with A, and I'm going to call this navlinks and data type that to an array. That's going to be a new array. So if you haven't used arrays yet, a quick crash course in what they allow you to do is they basically allow you to store multiple variables as the one variable name, and you can refer to them by typing in which position in the array that you want to retrieve the values from. And I'm going to show you how to do that throughout the tutorial, but to start off with, we're going to create 3 objects in this array. So I'm just going to press enter a couple of times, And to start an object, you always start it off with curly braces and then hit a comma if you want another one to come after it. So we want 3 objects in this. So I'm going to hit curly braces, open close 3 times, and with 2 commas after the first 2. So our first object, we want to have what our movie clip names are. So let's give an object a name. This one's going to be called MC name. Actually, let's just call it MC. And we'll give this a value of our first button that's on our stage. In this case, it's going to be called a home button. Likewise, our second object is going to be gallery button. And our third object is going to have an MC name of contact button. If this looks a little weird or unfamiliar to you, bear with me. It'll all make sense once we start creating the function that's actually going to set up our navigation button. So now that we have what link we want to refer to, we need to give it the text that we want to fill in for this nav text. Obviously, we don't want all 3 buttons to say nav text. We want one to say home, gallery, and contact. So we're going to add a comma after our first name value pair in our object, and we're going to call this link text, and let's give that a value of home for our first button, and that's a string. For our next one, our link text is going to be gallery, and finally our link text for our third object is going to be contact. Great, so we've got our navigation link array set up, and we've got 3 objects in here, and each of these objects has a property of MC and link text. So now we need to access that data somehow and set up our buttons with it. So after we load our page in, let's create a new function. We'll call this setup nav buttons. And just go ahead and create that function after our constructor. So we'll set private function setup nav buttons, and we're not going to return anything from this, so let's data type it to a void function and open close the curly braces. So in here, let's plan this out with comments first. Let's first loop through all of our buttons. Loop through our array of buttons, which is this a nav links array. And then while we're in the loop, I'm just going to tab that in, we're going to get a reference to the current button in the loop. And then once we have that reference of what button we're currently up to, we're going to set its text. Okay, so that's 3 things we're going to do in this setup nav buttons function. So let's get coding with that. I'm going to set up a for loop to handle looping through our buttons. So I'm going to type in for, open round bracket. I'm going to set up a variable for our counter object, which we're just going to call I, and we'll data type that to an integer and set it to 0. And as long as I, our counter, is less than our a nav links, good. I was hoping we'd get up to this at some point. So I'm typing in a nav links in our setup nav buttons function, and you can see here it's not showing up in the properties of Flash Develop. That's because we've created a variable up here in this function, and it only exists in this function. We can't use it down here yet. So what we need to do is we need to make this a class member. Once we make our variable a class member, it can be accessed in any function rather than just the function it was defined in. So you can see here when I was typing before, a nav links, it doesn't show up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the var in front of a nav links, and I'm going to get rid of the data type as well. So it's just going to be called a nav links. And just after I set up my 3 public variables, I'm going to set up a private variable here, which is only to be accessible in this class file. And the variable is going to be called a nav links. That's going to be an array. Because we set up a variable outside of our constructor code, whenever we call upon it now, we can actually get that reference in any function now because it's sitting up here. So if I type in a nav links here, you can see it shows up now in Flash Develop because it's smart enough to know that, yep, it's a class member, I can use it in this function. So as long as our counter, is less than the length of how many objects are in our array, we'll keep looping through this by incrementing 1 every time. Cool, so the loop's set up, but now we need to get a reference of the current button in the loop. So to do this, I'm going to set up another variable. I'm going to call it MC nav button. Yeah, that'll do. I'm going to data type that to a movie clip. And now we want to get this reference here. So the first time we loop through, we want to be able to get this home button. And to do that, by referencing the array, we type in a nav links. The position that we want is whatever our counter is currently up to. So it's going to start off at 0, which is this object here. Then it's going to go 1, then 2. So whatever counter you're currently up to, and then we want to get the property MC, because this is the property name here. And because this is a display object, Flash doesn't actually know we mean the movie clip version of this, so we need to cast it as a movie clip when we get the reference. And finally, we want to set up the button text. So we can say our MC nav button, and we want to get our navigation text that's inside this button. So if you look back in Flash, if we double click on this button, we called our text field nav text, so we can refer to it in our code here as nav text. It doesn't show up in the properties menu because we haven't defined a class for each of the buttons, which is a little bit outside of the scope of making a basic website. But we can still refer to it even though it doesn't show up as in the context menu. So we want to set the text property of this nav text field to our a nav links, whatever counter we're currently up to, and our link text, which we're referring to here. So let's save our code and run it and see what we get. Now, the links are changing, but you'll notice that we're only getting a couple of the letters. And this is a common problem that a lot of people run into, and they're wondering, why, what's going on? I've done everything right. When you close down your Flash movie that you're testing, you'll get an error here, and it will say that fonts should be embedded for any font that may be edited at runtime. So that's what we're doing. We're editing our text at runtime. So what we need to do is we need to embed the fonts. So if you're not currently in your text field and you're back up at scene 1, go to any one of these movie clips, double click on it, and go to the text field, and then click on the embed button here. And what you want to embed, typically for most cases, is you want to embed the last 4 options here. So uppercase, lowercase, numerals, punctuation. Go ahead and press OK. And now if you save and retest your movie clip, you should see that we've got our text coming in really nicely here. And we've got our 3 links down the bottom. But obviously they don't do anything just yet. So let's set that up in the next tutorial. We'll set up the click links so they actually load in the page. So thanks for watching this, guys, and yeah, stay tuned for the next one.